The glint of polished steel caught the light, a stark contrast to the worn leather of my old armchair. My son Michael had just handed me a small velvet box. "Happy birthday, Dad," he'd said, a rare, genuine smile on his face. Inside, nestled on a satin cushion, was a watch. Not just any watch, but a beautiful, classic timepiece, the kind I'd admired in shop windows but never dreamed of owning. It was expensive, I could tell, a gesture far beyond what I expected from Michael, given our complicated history. My heart swelled, a strange mix of pride and an unfamiliar warmth spreading through my chest. For a fleeting moment, I felt a connection, a bridge built across years of silence and unspoken resentments. But that moment, as quickly as it arrived, vanished. Because just 2 days later, that watch, that symbol of a fragile reconciliation, was no longer mine. It was on the wrist of another man, a man who wasn't my son, a man who, in many ways, was more family to me than my own flesh and blood. I gave it to my brother-in-law, David, and the reason why I did it, the story behind that seemingly callous act, is a tangled web of abandonment, sacrifice, and the enduring power of a love that chose me when no one else would. My life hasn't been a straight path. It's been a winding road, full of potholes and unexpected detours, often leading me to places I never thought I'd be. I grew up in a household where love was conditional, a reward for obedience, not a given. My parents, always more concerned with appearances than genuine affection, saw me as an extension of their own ambitions. When I failed to live up to their impossibly high standards, when I dared to pursue a path that wasn't pre-approved, I was swiftly cut off. "You're not our responsibility anymore," my father had said, his voice as cold and detached as if discussing the weather, not his own son. I was barely 18, standing in the living room of what I thought was my home, the words hitting me like a physical blow. The house fell silent after they drove away, leaving me alone in a way I had never experienced before. The silence was deafening, pressing against my chest until I could barely breathe, filling every corner of the empty rooms like a living thing. I was discarded, like an old piece of furniture that no longer matched their decor. I spent the next few days in that empty house, surviving on whatever food was left in the pantry, crying until I had no tears left to shed. I called every number I could think of, but I had no real friends, no extended family who knew me, no one who cared enough to help. On the 4th day, the landlord showed up with new tenants in tow. The lease was up and I had to leave immediately. With nowhere to go and less than $200 to my name, I found myself on the streets of a city that suddenly felt vast and indifferent. I slept in parks, in 24-hour diners, anywhere that would let me stay for a few hours without asking questions. I showered in gym bathrooms and washed my clothes in gas station sinks, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity while my world fell apart around me. I was invisible, forgotten, discarded like yesterday's newspaper. The first winter was the hardest thing I had ever experienced. The cold, the hunger, the gnawing loneliness. It was a constant battle for survival. I remember one night in December, huddled behind a dumpster outside a fast food restaurant, shivering so violently I thought my bones might break from the force of it. I was so hungry I could barely think straight, and so cold I couldn't feel my fingers or toes. I thought I might die there, alone and forgotten, just another homeless teenager that nobody cared about. That's when I met Maria. She was a janitor at the restaurant, and she found me there at 3 in the morning when she was taking out the trash. Instead of calling the police or telling me to move along like everyone else had done, she looked at me with the first genuine kindness I had seen in months. Her dark eyes were filled with compassion, and her weathered hands were gentle when she reached out to touch my shoulder. "Mijo, what are you doing out here?" "What?" she asked in accented English, her voice full of concern that brought fresh tears to my eyes. I tried to explain my situation, but the words came out in broken sobs that made no sense. Maria didn't need to understand everything, though. She saw a 17-year-old boy with nowhere to go, and her heart broke for me in a way that no one else's had. "Come," she said, helping me to my feet with surprising strength. "You can't stay out here. You'll freeze to death, and I won't let that happen." Maria took me to her small apartment, where she lived with her 3 children in a space that was barely big enough for 4 people, let alone 5. She didn't have much, but she shared what she had without hesitation. She gave me a warm meal of rice and beans that tasted better than any gourmet dinner I'd ever eaten, a hot shower that made me feel human again, and a place to sleep on her couch that felt like the most comfortable bed in the world. "Why are you helping me?" I asked her the next morning, still unable to believe that someone could show me such kindness without expecting anything in return. "You don't even know me," Maria smiled, her weathered hands gentle as she braided my hair the way my adoptive mother used to do when I was little. "Because everyone deserves a family, mijo. And sometimes family isn't the people who share your blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose to love you when you need it most. I lived with Maria and her family for 6 months, and they showed me what real love looked like. She helped me get my GED, studying with me at the kitchen table after her long shifts at work. She taught me Spanish, laughing at my pronunciation but encouraging me to keep trying. Her children, Rosa, Miguel, and little Carlos, welcomed me like I had always been their brother, sharing their toys and their stories and their dreams with me. For the first time since I was 17, I felt like I belonged somewhere, like I was part of something bigger than myself. But I knew I couldn't stay forever, no matter how much I wanted to. Maria was struggling to support her own family on her janitor's salary, and I didn't want to be a burden on people who had already given me so much. So when I turned 18, I got a job at a local diner and found a tiny studio apartment in a rough part of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and that meant everything to me. The next few years were a blur of working multiple jobs, trying to save money, and figuring out how to be an adult when no one had ever taught me how. I worked as a waiter during the day, a store clerk in the evenings, and a house cleaner on weekends, anything that would pay the bills and help me build a life for myself. I was determined to make something of myself, to prove that I was worth something, even if the people who raised me didn't think so. I put myself through community college, studying business administration while working full-time. It took me 4 years instead of 2 because I could only afford to take a few classes at a time, but I did it. I studied in break rooms and on buses, wrote papers on borrowed computers, and never missed a class unless I was too sick to stand. When I graduated with honors, Maria was there in the audience, crying and cheering like I was her own son, and I felt prouder than I had ever felt in my life. After college, I got a job at a small marketing firm in Las Vegas. It wasn't glamorous and the pay wasn't great, but it was a start in the career I wanted. I worked harder than anyone else in the office, staying late, taking on extra projects, learning everything I could about the business. I was good at what I did, and for the first time in my life, I felt proud of myself and what I was accomplishing. By the time I was 25, I had my own apartment in a nice part of town, a reliable car that I had bought with my own money, and a savings account that grew a little bit every month. I had built a life for myself from nothing, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. I had friends from work, a career that was advancing, and most importantly, I had Maria and her family, who had become my chosen family in every way that mattered. But there was always a part of me that wondered about my real family, a hole in my heart that nothing could fill. Who were my biological parents? Why had they given me up? Did I have siblings somewhere who looked like me? The questions haunted me, especially late at night when I was alone with my thoughts and the silence of my apartment. I tried searching online, spending hours on genealogy websites and missing persons databases, but without knowing my real name or any details about my birth, it was impossible to find anything. My adoptive parents had never told me anything about where I came from, and now they were gone, taking those secrets with them wherever they had moved in California. Years passed, and I learned to live with the uncertainty, to focus on the life I was building, rather than the past I couldn't change. I got promoted to account coordinator, then to account manager, then to senior account manager. I was making good money, had a beautiful apartment with a view of the mountains, and was dating a wonderful woman named Sarah, who loved me for who I was, not where I came from. Sarah was everything my biological family wasn't. She was kind, supportive, interested in my thoughts and dreams. She made me laugh, held me when I cried, and never made me feel like I was a burden or an obligation. We had been together for 2 years, and I was starting to think about marriage, about building a real family with someone who chose to love me. But the questions about my past never went away completely. They lurked in the background of my happiness, a constant reminder that there was a part of my story I might never know. Then on a rainy Thursday afternoon in March, when I was 32 years old and sitting in my corner office reviewing a client presentation, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, with a California area code that made my heart skip a beat. I almost didn't answer it, thinking it was probably a telemarketer or someone trying to sell me something I didn't need. "Hello?" I said, distracted as I reviewed the quarterly numbers for our biggest client. "Is this Arthur?" The voice was female, older, with a slight tremor that spoke of age or emotion or both. There was a long pause, and I could hear the woman breathing heavily on the other end of the line, like she was trying to gather courage for whatever she was about to say. "Arthur, my name is Eleanor Thompson. I think I might be your grandmother." The presentation slipped from my hands, papers scattering across my office floor like autumn leaves in the wind. My heart stopped, then started beating so fast I thought it might explode in my chest. The words echoed in my head, impossible and wonderful and terrifying all at once. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" I whispered, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Your grandmother, your biological grandmother. I've been looking for you for 29 years, sweetheart. Every single day for 29 years. I sank into my chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. The office around me seemed to fade away, and all I could focus on was this voice, this woman who claimed to be family. Real family. Blood family. "How did you find me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "It's a long story, sweetheart, but I need you to know that we never stopped looking for you. We never gave up hope that we'd find you someday. Not for a single day." Tears were streaming down my face, and I could barely speak around the lump in my throat. "We? Your grandfather and I. Your mother. Your siblings. Your whole family, Arthur. We've been searching for you since the day you disappeared. We've never stopped believing you were out there somewhere." "Disappeared?" I whispered, confusion mixing with hope and fear. "But I wasn't kidnapped. My adoptive parents took me in when I was 3. They told me my parents didn't want me." There was another long pause, and when Eleanor spoke again, her voice was filled with pain and anger that made my chest tighten. "Arthur, honey, you were never adopted. You were kidnapped. The people who raised you took you from a playground in Sacramento when you were 3 years old. We reported it to the police immediately, but they were never found. Until now." The room started spinning again, just like it had 15 years ago in that kitchen in Henderson. Everything I thought I knew about my life was wrong. Again, my adoptive parents hadn't taken me out of kindness or pity. They had stolen me from a family who loved me, who had been looking for me all these years. "That's impossible," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew it wasn't impossible. It explained so much. Why they had never shown me any adoption papers when I asked. Why they had always been evasive about my early childhood. Why they had been able to abandon me so easily when I was 17. I wasn't their adopted son. I was their victim. "Arthur, we have pictures of you from when you were little. We have your birth certificate. Your real name is Arthur James Thompson. You were born on June 15th, 1991 in Sacramento, California. You're our grandson, and we love you so much." I was sobbing now, unable to control the emotions flooding through me like a dam had burst. Relief, anger, confusion, hope, grief for all the years we had lost, all mixed together in an overwhelming wave that threatened to drown me. "Where are you?" I managed to ask through my tears. "We're in Sacramento. We never moved, hoping that someday you'd find your way back to us. Arthur, would you like to come home?" Home. The word hit me like a lightning bolt, illuminating everything that had been dark in my life. I had spent my entire adult life building a home for myself, creating a family from the people who chose to love me. But the idea of having a real family, a biological family who had been looking for me all these years, was almost too much to comprehend. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I want to come home." 2 days later, I was on a plane to Sacramento, my hands shaking as I gripped my boarding pass. Eleanor had sent me photos via email, and I had stared at them for hours, memorizing every detail. There was a picture of a little boy with dark curls and bright green eyes, standing between a man and woman who were clearly his parents. The little boy looked exactly like me at that age, down to the stubborn set of his jaw and the mischievous glint in his eyes. There were pictures of birthday parties I should have attended, Christmas mornings I should have been part of, family vacations I should have taken, an entire life I should have lived stolen from me by people I had trusted and loved. When I walked off the plane at Sacramento International Airport, I saw them immediately. Eleanor was holding a sign with my name on it, tears streaming down her weathered face. Next to her stood a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes who I knew must be my grandfather, Robert. And beside them were 3 other people who looked so much like me it took my breath away. "Arthur," Eleanor whispered as I approached them, my own tears making it hard to see. "My beautiful grandson." She pulled me into her arms, and I felt something I had never felt before in my entire life. I felt like I was exactly where I belonged, like a puzzle piece finally finding its place in the picture. This woman smelled like vanilla and lavender, and her hug felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering in the wilderness. "We missed you so much," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Every single day for 29 years, we missed you." My grandfather Robert wrapped both of us in his strong arms, and I could feel his tears on my hair. "Welcome home, sweetheart. Welcome home." Then I met my real family, the family I should have grown up with. My mother, Jennifer, who looked like an older version of me and who couldn't stop touching my face like she was afraid I might disappear again if she let go. My brother Michael, who was 2 years older than me and who had spent his entire life wondering what happened to his little brother. My sister Amanda, who was 3 years younger and who had grown up hearing stories about the brother she barely remembered but had never stopped loving. We went to my grandparents' house, the same house where my mother had grown up, the same house where I should have grown up. They had kept my room exactly as it was the day I disappeared, like a shrine to their lost grandson. A little boy's room with blue walls and stuffed animals and picture books, waiting for a child who never came home. "We always believed you'd come back," Jennifer said, sitting on the small bed and pulling me down beside her. "I never stopped being your mother, even when I didn't know where you were. Not for a single day." Over the next few days, they told me everything, filling in the blanks of a story I had never known. How I had been playing at a playground while my mother talked to another parent about preschool enrollment. How the people who raised me had approached me, told me they had puppies in their car and convinced me to come with them to see the cute animals. How my mother had turned around to find me gone, vanished without a trace. They showed me missing person flyers with my picture on them, yellowed with age but carefully preserved. They showed me the room they had set up for tips and leads, filled with maps and phone numbers and desperate hope. They showed me years of birthday cakes they had made for me, hoping against hope that someday I'd be there to blow out the candles and make a wish that had already come true. "We never gave up," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion, as he showed me boxes of evidence they had collected over the years. "Even when the police said we should accept that you were probably dead, we never gave up. We knew you were out there somewhere, and we knew we'd find you eventually." I learned that they had finally found me through a DNA database, a modern miracle that had connected us across time and distance. Jennifer had submitted her DNA to every genealogy website available, hoping that someday I might do the same out of curiosity about my heritage. When I had taken a DNA test the previous year, wondering about my ethnic background, it had finally connected us after nearly 3 decades of searching. "The moment we got the match, we knew it was you," Eleanor said, showing me the email notification that had changed everything. "We've been trying to figure out how to contact you ever since, afraid you might not believe us or might not want to see us." I told them about my life, about my adoptive parents abandoning me when I was 17, about living on the streets, about Maria and her family who had saved me, about building my career and my life in Nevada. They listened with a mixture of pride and heartbreak, proud of what I had accomplished but heartbroken about everything I had endured alone. "You're so strong," Amanda said, holding my hand tightly. "I can't believe everything you've been through, but you're here now and that's all that matters. You're home." I stayed in Sacramento for a week, getting to know my real family, learning about the life I should have had. They were everything my adoptive parents weren't. They were warm, loving, supportive, interested in every detail of my life. They made me feel valued and cherished in a way I had never experienced, like I was precious and important just because I existed. But I also realized that I couldn't just pick up where I left off, couldn't pretend that 29 years hadn't passed. I was 32 years old, not 3. I had built a life in Nevada, a career, relationships, responsibilities. I had Maria and her family, who had been my chosen family for 15 years and who deserved my loyalty and love. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted to Jennifer on my last night there, sitting in the garden where I should have played as a child. She smiled and brushed a tear from my cheek with the same gentle touch I remembered from my earliest memories. "You don't have to figure it all out right now, sweetheart. We have the rest of our lives to get to know each other. The important thing is that we found each other. Everything else will work itself out." When I flew back to Nevada, everything looked different. My apartment felt smaller. My life felt incomplete. I had spent so many years building walls around my heart, protecting myself from the pain of abandonment and rejection. But now those walls were crumbling and I was letting love in, real love from people who had never stopped loving me. I called Maria that night and told her everything, crying as I explained about finding my biological family. She cried with me, happy that I had found my family but worried about what it meant for our relationship. "Mijo, you will always be my son too," she said firmly. "Finding your blood family doesn't change that. Love multiplies, it doesn't divide. You have room in your heart for all of us." Over the next few months, I traveled back and forth between Nevada and California, slowly building relationships with my biological family while maintaining the life I had created. It wasn't easy. There were awkward moments, misunderstandings, and the constant challenge of trying to fit 29 years of missed experiences into phone calls and weekend visits. But gradually, we found our rhythm. Jennifer and I talked every day, sharing the mundane details of our lives that mothers and sons should share. Michael and Amanda included me in their group texts and family jokes, treating me like the brother I had always been. Eleanor and Robert sent me care packages and called just to hear my voice, making up for decades of missed conversations. 6 months after that first phone call, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I decided to move to Sacramento to be closer to my family. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked when I told her, her face showing the pain of impending loss. We had been dating for 2 years, and I loved her, but I knew that this was something I had to do. "I need to be close to them," I said, taking her hands in mine. "I've spent my whole life wondering where I belonged, and now I know. I belong with my family." Sarah understood, even though it meant the end of our relationship. "I want you to be happy, Arthur. And if being with your family makes you happy, then that's what you should do." I gave my notice at work, sold my apartment, and packed up my life once again. But this time I wasn't running away from something, I was running toward something. I was running toward home, toward family, toward the life I was meant to have. Maria cried when I told her I was leaving, but she understood too. "You need to be with your family, mijo. But remember, you will always have a family here too. This will always be your home." I moved into a small apartment near my grandparents' house and got a job at a marketing firm in Sacramento. It was a step down from my position in Nevada, but I didn't care. I was finally where I belonged, finally part of a family that wanted me and loved me unconditionally. The first Christmas I spent with my real family was magical beyond anything I had ever imagined. We made cookies using Eleanor's grandmother's recipe, the same recipe that should have been passed down to me. We watched old home movies of Christmases I should have been part of, and I cried seeing the empty space where I should have been. We opened presents under a tree that was decorated with ornaments my family had been collecting for me for 29 years, each one representing a Christmas they had hoped I would come home. "This is the best Christmas we've ever had," Jennifer said, watching me open a gift that contained a photo album filled with pictures of our family throughout the years. "Having you here makes everything complete." As I looked around at these people who shared my eyes, my smile, my stubborn streak, I realized that I had finally found what I had been searching for my entire life. Not just a family, but a sense of belonging, a sense of being truly, unconditionally loved for who I was, not what I could do or provide. My adoptive parents had told me I was never part of their family, and they were right. I wasn't part of their family because I already had a family who had never stopped loving me, never stopped looking for me, never stopped believing that someday I would come home. That phone call had changed everything. It had given me back my identity, my history, my future. It had shown me that sometimes the family you're born into really is the family you're meant to be with. And as I sat there on Christmas morning, surrounded by the people who had loved me before I could even remember, I knew that I was finally, truly, home. Years passed, and my life in Sacramento flourished. I built a strong relationship with my biological family, a bond forged in shared history and rediscovered love. My brother Michael became my closest confidant, and my sister Amanda, a beacon of unwavering support. My grandparents, Eleanor and Robert, were my anchors, filling the profound void left by years of loneliness. I even reconnected with Maria and her family, who remained my cherished, chosen family, a constant reminder of where I came from and the kindness that saved me. Life was good, stable, filled with a sense of belonging I'd craved for so long. I married Sarah, the wonderful woman who had stood by me through the initial shock of my past, and we built a beautiful life together, eventually having a son, Michael. Michael, my son. He was a bright, energetic kid, but as he grew, a subtle distance began to form between us. He was a good boy, but he had a way of taking things for granted, a sense of entitlement that sometimes grated on me. I tried to teach him the profound value of hard work, the immense importance of gratitude, but it felt like my words often fell on deaf ears. He'd grown up with privilege, with a loving, stable family, something I'd only found later in life. Perhaps that was the root of our disconnect. He couldn't truly understand the struggles I'd faced, the immense sacrifices I'd made, because he'd never had to. Then came my birthday, and the watch. When Michael presented it, that expensive, gleaming timepiece, I saw it not just as a gift, but as a potent symbol. A symbol of his success, yes, but also a symbol of the life he'd always known, a life of comfort and ease. It was a beautiful gesture, a clear sign that he cared deeply, but it also felt heavy. It felt like something I hadn't earned, something that didn't quite fit the man I had become, the man who still remembered shivering behind a dumpster, the man who knew the true cost of every single thing he owned. And that's where David, my brother-in-law, enters the story. David is Sarah's brother, a man who, like me, had faced his own share of profound adversity. He wasn't abandoned in the same way, but he'd grown up in a family that struggled financially, a family that knew intimately what it meant to work tirelessly for every single penny. He'd put himself through college, sacrificing countless nights and weekends, always prioritizing his kids' needs, his wife's comfort, anything before his own. He was a man of quiet dignity, of unwavering integrity, someone who understood the true meaning of a hard-earned dollar. He never asked for anything, but he was always there, a steady, reliable presence in our lives. A few months before my birthday, David's old watch, a cheap, worn-out thing he'd owned for years, had finally broken. He'd sighed, shrugged, and said he'd get around to replacing it someday, but I knew he wouldn't. He'd prioritize his kids' needs, his wife's comfort, anything before his own. He was the kind of man who would give you the shirt off his back, even if it was the only one he had. He was the kind of man who embodied the values Maria had taught me. That family isn't always blood, but the people who choose to love you when you need it most. He was the kind of man who understood sacrifice. So, when Michael gave me that watch, I knew, almost instinctively, what I had to do. It wasn't a rejection of Michael's gift, not at all. It was an act of profound translation. It was me taking a symbol of privilege and transforming it into a symbol of gratitude, of recognition, of a different, deeper kind of love. I wanted that watch to go to someone who would truly appreciate its intrinsic value, not just its monetary worth, but the immense effort, the struggle, the years of hard work that a gift like that represented. I wanted it to go to someone who understood the true weight of a dollar, the profound meaning of a sacrifice. The day after my birthday, I drove to David's house. He was in his garage, tinkering with his old car, grease smudged on his forehead. "Hey, Arthur," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "What brings you here?" I pulled the velvet box from my pocket. "Happy belated birthday, David," I said, even though his birthday was months away. "This is for you." He looked at the box, then at me, confusion etched on his face. "Arthur, what is this? My birthday isn't for ages. Just open it," I urged. He did, and his eyes widened when he saw the watch. "Arthur, this is too much. I can't accept this. This must have cost a fortune." "It was a gift to me," I explained, "and I want you to have it. Your old one broke and you deserve something nice, something reliable." He tried to protest, but I insisted. "Please, David, it would mean a lot to me." He finally took it, his fingers tracing the smooth metal. "Thank you, Arthur, really, this is incredible." He put it on, and it fit perfectly, gleaming on his wrist. He looked at it, then at me, a genuine, heartfelt smile spreading across his face. And in that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. The watch, on his wrist, felt right. It felt like it had found its true purpose. A few weeks later, Michael came over for dinner. He noticed the absence of the watch immediately. "Dad, where's the watch I gave you?" he asked, a hint of hurt in his voice. "Did you lose it?" "No, son," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "I gave it to David." His jaw dropped. You gave away my birthday gift? To Uncle David? Why would you do that?" The anger was clear in his tone, and I knew this was the moment. The moment to explain, to bridge the significant gap that had always existed between us. "Michael," I began, "that watch is beautiful and I appreciate it more than you know. But it's more than just a watch. It's a powerful symbol, and I wanted that symbol to go to someone who truly understood its weight, its profound meaning." I told him about David's old broken watch, about his quiet sacrifices, about his unwavering dedication to his family despite his own needs. I told him about Maria, about my own past, about what it felt like to have nothing, to build a life brick by brick. I told him about the kindness of strangers, the chosen family, the true value of things that can't be bought. I didn't lecture him. I simply told him my story, the deeply personal story of how I learned the fundamental difference between value and worth, between material wealth and true richness. Michael listened intently, his initial anger slowly fading, replaced by a thoughtful, contemplative silence. He looked at his hands, then at me, and I saw a flicker of genuine understanding in his eyes, something I hadn't seen before. I never thought about it like that, Dad," he said quietly. "I just wanted to get you something nice, something expensive to show you I cared." "And I know you did, son," I replied, my voice soft. "And that means the world to me. But sometimes the greatest gifts aren't about what they cost, but about what they truly represent, and who they ultimately go to." He nodded slowly. "So, you gave it to Uncle David because he deserved it more? He understood it more, Michael. He understood the arduous journey it took to acquire something like that. the kind of life that allows for such a generous gift. He understood the profound sacrifice. That conversation was a profound turning point for us. It wasn't a magical fix, but it was a significant beginning. Michael started spending more time with David, helping him in the garage, listening intently to his stories. He began to see the world through a different, more empathetic lens, a lens that wasn't just focused on acquisition, but on meaningful contribution, on deep empathy. He started volunteering at a local shelter, something he'd never considered before, dedicating his time and energy. He began to truly appreciate the small things, the simple gestures, the quiet acts of kindness that truly build a meaningful life. My son gave me a watch for my birthday, but I gave it to my brother-in-law. And in doing so, I didn't just pass on a material object. I passed on a vital lesson, a lasting legacy, a profound piece of my own hard-won wisdom. I showed my son that true value isn't measured in fleeting dollars, but in enduring dignity. That real family isn't just blood, but the unbreakable bonds we choose to forge, the people we consistently lift up, the silent sacrifices we make for those we deeply love. The watch was a powerful catalyst, a small gleaming object that unlocked a deeper, more profound understanding between a father and a son. A bridge built not with cold steel and intricate gears, but with warm empathy and undeniable truth. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all. It was the invaluable gift of seeing my son begin to understand the world and his rightful place in it, with a heart as open and genuinely generous as the man who now proudly wore my birthday watch.